All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about the social safety net, but maybe not in the way you're used to. We're going to look at it as a promise, a kind of magical blanket that we all weave together. And we're going to unpack what happens when that promise gets threatened, when the blanket starts to come apart, all in the name of fiscal responsibility.
This quote, wow, it just gets right to the heart of everything, doesn't it? The idea that policy isn't just about numbers on a page, but that it can actually be a form of hoarded power. That's really the lens for our entire discussion today. It frames this whole thing as a story that's about way more than just economics.
So how do you even begin to talk about something as huge as a society's promise to its people? Well, the piece we're diving into today uses this really powerful metaphor to help us get our heads around it, the magical blanket.
So this magical blanket, it's not just a bunch of government programs. At its core, it's a fundamental agreement we have with each other that, nobody gets left behind. It's that simple idea that when someone stumbles or falls on hard times, the community is there to catch them.
And here is where that abstract idea starts to feel really real. These aren't just bullet points. The source describes them as the actual threads of the blanket itself. Things like healthcare, food assistance, housing help. Each one is an essential lifeline, and they're all woven together to give people a sense of security and a real shot at opportunity.
And this is absolutely crucial. The point the source makes again and again is that this blanket isn't about charity or handouts. It's about building a stable foundation for the entire society. When you invest in people's basic well-being, you're really investing in our collective strength and just basic human decency.
Okay, so we have this foundation, this blanket. But what happens when that foundation starts to crack? Our next section gets into the main conflict here, the force that threatens to unravel this very blanket we've been talking about.
And that force has a name: austerity. Now, on the surface, it can sound pretty responsible, right? Cutting spending, balancing the budget, but the source we're examining really urges us to look a lot closer, to ask what is actually being cut and, maybe more importantly, why.
And boom, there's the core critique. Austerity gets reframed here, not as some neutral economic plan, but as a deliberate choice. It's a choice that demands sacrifice, but a sacrifice that isn't shared equally. It really forces you to ask the question, who exactly is being asked to sacrifice here?
This slide just lays it out so clearly. The author calls it a tilted scale. Just look at the two columns. On one side, you see what's on the chopping block: help for families in poverty, support for people with disabilities, funding for schools. And on the other side, what often doesn't get touched: big corporate subsidies and tax breaks for the wealthy. You see a pattern emerging pretty quick, and it shows you exactly who ends up carrying the weight of these cuts.
So what's the actual result of this tilted scale? What does it really feel like on the ground when the threads of that magical blanket start getting snipped one by one?
Yeah, these aren't just abstract ideas. The cost is measured in human lives and people's well-being. It leads to very real things like poverty rates going up and health outcomes getting worse. And it creates this constant climate of fear and despair for people who rely on programs like Medicaid or food assistance, which always seem to be at risk.
And to capture that emotional toll, the author actually turns to poetry. The poem starts with the blanket's origin, reminding us that it was stitched together with empathy, with this simple goal of providing comfort and a little security.
Then, the poem just pivots, but hands with sharp scissors now call it too much. They cut with cold fingers untouched by the touch. That imagery is so striking, right? It suggests this deep, deep disconnect between the policymakers who are making the cuts and the people who are actually going to feel that sharp edge.
And the poem leaves us with this image. It's definitely an image of damage, no doubt, but it's also one of resilience. The blanket isn't gone. It's tattered, yeah, and it's torn, but it's still there, which leads us perfectly into our final section. Because this analysis doesn't just leave us with the problem, it also offers a way of thinking about solutions, and it gives it this really creative name, the Dragon Trial.
So this isn't some dense policy paper. It's actually a set of thought exercises designed to make these huge ideas feel personal. It's asking you to first draw the blanket. What does a strong community actually look like in your mind? Then list the lifelines where you live. It even suggests you create a kindness budget. And maybe most importantly, it challenges you to spot the cuts and get in the habit of asking who wins and who loses when these lifelines are threatened.
And really, that brings us to the final, most powerful takeaway from this whole piece. It leaves us with these two simple but incredibly profound questions. The next time you hear about a budget cut or some policy change, don't just ask if it saves money. Ask who it serves. Who benefits from this?
and who pays the price. And that, the source argues, is how you begin to mend the net.